This podcast is presented by Skies Magazine. If you're interested in the Canadian aviation industry, Skies is your go-to multimedia resource for the latest news, in-depth features, stunning photography, and insightful video coverage. Whether you're an aviation professional or enthusiast, Skies is dedicated to keeping you informed and bringing your passion for aviation to life. Visit skiesmag.com to learn more and subscribe to stay updated on all things Canadian aviation.
Fuel and ignition switches on. RPM switches set. TD switches normal. Doors and hatches closed. Light out. Strobe light on. Restart check is complete. Clear left. Engineers, start number 2. Starting 2. Wind 310, Pilot Project Podcast, clear takeoff, runway 31 left.
All right, we're ready for departure here at the Pilot Project Podcast, the best source for stories and advice from RCAF and mission aviation pilots, brought to you by Skies Magazine. I'm your host, Brian Morrison, and today we'd like to welcome you to our very special 100th episode of the podcast. Here with me to mark this milestone is CH-146 Griffin pilot and commander of the RCAF, Lieutenant General Jamie Speiser-Blanchet. Jamie, thanks so much for being here today. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Well, thank you very much. And congratulations on your 100th episode. It's a privilege for me to be here at this time. Awesome.
Thank you. In today's episode, we'll talk about her journey through the Air Force, the leadership lessons that shaped her, and take a deep dive into the future of the RCAF, from building a fifth-generation Air Force to growing the force and ensuring Canada remains ready to operate alongside its allies around the world. But before we go into any of that, let's go through Jamie's bio. Lieutenant General Jamie Speiser-Blanchet enrolled in the Canadian Armed Forces in 1994 and graduated from the Royal Military College of Canada with a degree in computer engineering. She trained as a tactical helicopter pilot on the CH-146 Griffin and went on to fly a wide range of domestic and international operations. Over the course of her career, she has commanded at multiple levels, including 403 Helicopter Operational Training Squadron, the Canadian Forces Intelligence Group, and the Cadets and Junior Canadian Rangers Group. She has also served in senior strategic roles, including as military assistant to the Minister of National Defense and as special advisor to the Chief of Defense Staff. Operationally, she has served on multiple deployments as a helicopter pilot, including United Nations and NATO missions in Haiti and Bosnia. She also served as Deputy Commander of Operations for Joint Task Force Impact in Kuwait in 2019. In Canada, she has deployed on numerous domestic operations. A graduate of the Joint Command and Staff Program and the Defense and Strategic Studies course in Australia, she holds a Master of Defense Studies from the Royal Military College and a Master of Politics and Policy from Deakin University. In July 2025, she was promoted to her current rank and assumed command of the Royal Canadian Air Force, becoming the first woman to lead the RCAF. Jamie is married to Janine Blanchet, a retired tactical aviation pilot, and they have 3 amazing children, Emma, Zachary, and Samuel. So let's get started with your early days. What first drew you to the military and to aviation specifically?
So my father was a fighter pilot in the RCAF. And so I had the opportunity to move around and follow him with the family throughout his career. And it included living in Germany when we had bases then in the 80s, so a long time ago. But those were really positive memories for me. And when it came time to, think of my path after high school, I was very interested in studying engineering. And because I was familiar with the Air Force, that was certainly something that was of interest. So I knew I wanted to do something within the Air Force. What I didn't know was all of the opportunities I could have as a pilot, because it hadn't been open to women for that long. But by the time I got to the recruiting center, I thought I was, if I wanted to study engineering, that I would probably have to be an engineer or something. So even though my dad was a pilot and I had grown up around this and I loved what the Air Force did and I loved what he did, it wasn't until I was fortunate enough, someone at the recruiting center said, well, what occupation would you like? And I said, I thought I had to do engineering. They said, well, are you interested in being a pilot? And I said, well, can I do that and study engineering? And it was, yeah. And I said, well, then that's what I want to do. So it's a bit of an unusual story. And I certainly never looked back from that point on. And my dad is the one who presented me my wings. And it was a very, very special bond that we have.
Oh, that's such a cool story to be able to follow in your dad's footsteps. And
yeah.
Were you nervous at all about joining into what was predominantly a male-dominated occupation, or was it more normalized by then?
So very good question, because when I think back, it certainly was not normalized. I knew it was male-dominated, and I was I was okay with that, and I was kind of excited about the opportunity. So I knew that I would have to prove myself, or I felt that I would have to prove myself. I was not wrong. However, I kind of felt up for the challenge. I think I just had an abundance of confidence that I kind of laugh about now. But no, I saw it as a big adventure and a really incredible opportunity. And then the idea that they would, pay for my education, and then I'd have a job after, and I got to travel and fly. Like it was just a dream come true.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of how I felt about the idea of joining as a pilot as well. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you viewed it as a challenge that you wanted to overcome.
Yes, absolutely.
Did you have any flight experience before you got to flight training?
I did not. In fact, my dad took me up once in a Cessna, just from a local flying club, and that was actually it. And it was interesting because I've had a lot of friends that I've encountered who were part of the cadets and air cadets or Army cadets and other things, and it was something I think I would have enjoyed. However, it wasn't something that was accessible to me. Like we had to go find it, I think. So because I didn't have a sort of cadet squadron near my house or in our neighborhood, and part of that was probably from moving around a bit too. It just wasn't something that I was aware of. But when I do think back, I think that that's probably something that I would have enjoyed very much.
Yeah, which is kind of cool because eventually you ended up working a little bit with the cadet system, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So you ended up going to flight training with, as you said, no flight training experience, which is always kind of neat because that is what the system is built to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you went through flight training, what was one lesson that stayed with you throughout your career?
I would say that it tested my resolve. It was exciting, but it was stressful, as you know. And I think one of the lessons that I didn't learn it fully during flight training, but I certainly had to start learning it then, and it has carried on, is the idea of letting go when things aren't going well or something didn't go well. Because in that environment, when you're constantly learning, constantly being evaluated and assessed and trying to develop all the skills that you need, things don't always go right. And so I found that I had to really learn to let go, if I had a bad flight or a bad day or something, and just be able to look to the future and learn from that and pick up and move on. So it's something I think that a lot of people struggle with, and I certainly did. And I think that my flight training really kind of helped me in that area.
Yeah, I think that is basically one of the crucial milestones in a pilot's journey when they finally learn, like, I am going to make mistakes. I have to just do my best and move on and learn from them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you were selected to fly with the TACHEL community where you deployed on operations in places like Haiti and Bosnia. Is there an experience that really stands out for you from those deployments?
So all of those deployments were very exciting to me, and I had the real privilege of being able to deploy early in my career. In fact, I remember being promoted to captain when I was in Haiti on the peacekeeping mission there. And so they all kind of have different. I have a lot of memories from all of them. I remember the real camaraderie. I had a very good group of coworkers at the squadron, and it was just fun to be able to. It felt like an adventure. I do recall specifically from those early experiences, really the feeling of serving something that felt more important, than me, and being able to see or really feel Canadian, because when you're in another country and serving, and certainly we would work with other allies and militaries and whatnot, I felt very proud to be Canadian, and I thought that's something that really stuck with me as well.
Yeah, there's something special about your first few deployments and representing Canada on the global stage, and also that feeling of like you're being a part of current events. Like you're on the pointy end of what's happening in the world, and you feel like you're actually making a difference, which I think for a lot of us is one of the big reasons we join.
I agree. Yes.
Yeah. So you've had several command appointments, including 403 Helicopter Operational Training Squadron, the Canadian Forces Intelligence Group, and the Cadets and Junior Canadian Rangers Group, which we mentioned earlier. Was there a specific command appointment that you would consider truly formative for you as a leader?
So I'm not sure there was only one. I think that they all contribute to the person I am today, to the leader I am today, and they all provided me really valuable learning opportunities. I think in that kind of environment and being in command, where I learned the value of, my command team partner, of how important it is and what tremendous support that we get from our chief warrant officers and our senior NCM cadre. And I think that those relationships I learned, and I think I got more out of them with more experience and higher different types of formations. But those are definitely something that I think were formative and important. I think too, really learning to become comfortable being myself in all of these environments. And there's a maturity that comes with every, rank level and every experience. And so I think that they all sort of help to build a different kind of confidence that I didn't really know I needed for the next level.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I look back on it, though, I see a very important progression of learning and maturing and really feeling comfortable to be myself when I'm in some of these positions.
Yeah, I would imagine that as you progress through the rank structure, you kind of have to learn how to be more authentically yourself within that rank because you're leading more and more people. It's less of being like I hate to use this expression almost, but a cog in the machine, and you're becoming a bigger cog, a bigger part of that machine. So I imagine that kind of you have to find your own confidence in your own style.
I think you do if you're going to be successful, because some that are perhaps less successful are perhaps trying to be something that they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a real thing too, because I found that when I was younger, and especially as a woman, and one of very few most of the time, I often kind of struggled to, maybe find my own voice or feel comfortable being myself because I wanted to be accepted and I didn't necessarily want to stand out. So there is a bit of a pressure, or there can be, to kind of act in a different way, in a way that you think people will expect. And that's something that happily I did learn fairly early on, that that wasn't going to work, because I couldn't be effective if I was trying to be something that I'm not. So that's certainly something that has stuck with me as well, and that I absolutely encourage for everyone, because I think that we all have to really try to understand ourselves and bring our best selves to whatever situation we're in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've experienced that myself. I think it's part of maybe the military culture. Like there is a sense of uniformity and wanting to be the same. And sometimes that can also leak into how we express ourselves, the opinions we have, all those kinds of things. So that's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the world is full of paradoxes, and that's kind of one of them. We are all part of the same organization. There is a certain uniformity. That's why we have uniforms and training and things. However, we are all still individual humans. So, how do you balance that in a healthy way?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something that is still evolving within our culture, and it's certainly something that is important to understand. And I think it's going to help us to better understand that as we look to the future and a lot of the things that are changing.
Yeah, I would agree. I was going to say the same thing. I think that the RCAF is maybe in a point right now where they're learning about how do we strike that balance between individuality and still being a cohesive unit.
Yes, I agree.
So at what point did your perspective start to shift from being focused on flying in operations to thinking more strategically about the institution as a whole? Because one thing I've experienced watching friends get promoted is that they start to gain like a higher perspective than I had as a captain, where they're a little more aware of what's going on in the background, why we're doing what. So when did your perspective start to shift?
That's a great question. I think it was likely around the rank of major, and certainly when I was posted to Ottawa for the first time, which was at the rank of major. And when you start to really see how decisions are made, or get a glimpse, or in my case, it dove straight into sort of the strategic political environment, because my first job in Ottawa, was as a military assistant to the Minister of National Defense. So it was fascinating, and I learned a lot. And I think that by interacting a lot with the Assistant Deputy Minister of Policy sort of organization that provides a lot of the advice and explanations of decision and option space, working, of course, with all of the other parts of the CAF and the department, I really liked it. And because I could bring an operational perspective into a lot of those things, I felt like I could contribute. And that was something that really interested me. And I was fascinated by how the whole machine worked. So I think that's when it really started. And then by going on the Joint Command and Staff program eventually, and being able to study and have time for that, and to be able to really look at these like literally strategic studies and understand governments and some history and other parts of the organization and global security, I thought that was really fascinating. And I kind of just continued to learn and grow and really try to understand the institution with a real desire to influence positive change where I could.
So let's move into your time as the commander of the RCAF. When you took command of the RCAF, what were your immediate priorities?
So at the outset, my priority was, and frankly still is, about laying the groundwork for meaningful and lasting change when it comes to the transformation that the RCAF is frankly already undergoing. We, in my mind, need to set the conditions for this lasting transformation. And what that means is making sure that the plans that are underway, do they still make sense? Do the conditions under which we made those original plans still exist? It's about revalidating some assumptions. Frankly, so much has changed, especially in this past 12 months, in terms of investment, in terms of security environment. It's really about ensuring that we're still aligned. And I see it as focusing on people and purpose and progress, in the sense that we have to make sure that not only do we have the people, but that they are supported, trained, organized, and equipped, and upskill them. We have to upskill our people and figure out how do we do that. We have to do so, in my mind, making sure that everyone understands our purpose. And so it comes down to understanding why we're doing things and why certain decisions are being made, and ultimately where we may be changing directions from previous decisions. And of course, in my view, it's all about continuous progress. So we just need to continue stepping forward, but making sure that we're assessing things as we're going, because there is just so much that's really on our plate right now, and there is a lot going on everywhere. And I really would like to be able to focus our teams so that we are ensuring that we're remaining operationally effective and planning for the future, which of course is a challenging balance to have.
I was going to say that must be very, very challenging. As you said, the global situation is constantly changing, especially in the last 12 months. Things just seem to rapidly, the way we think things are going to be just changes so suddenly. It must be a real challenge to have some continuity in planning, but still be reevaluating to make sure that the decisions still make sense.
It is a constant challenge. And frankly, if it was easy, we would have a lot more answers already, and we don't. But I think it's important to note, we can't change overnight. So we need to make sure that we set the right conditions for growth, because we are growing, and we are absolutely modernizing capabilities and catching up on a lot of things that perhaps were not receiving the attention or investment that they needed over many years. And so this is a really good opportunity. It's very exciting. And I just want to make sure that we're setting the right conditions for success so that these will, endure certainly well beyond me, because this is what's really setting us up for the RCAF of the future.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the people being a big priority. And I think that people I call it the people problem, is one of the biggest issues facing the RCAF right now. There are so many fleets that we are, as you mentioned, modernizing or replacing, or we're standing up new capabilities. It seems like the biggest challenge will be people. We need people for the current fleets, we need people for the new fleets, and we need experienced people to train those folks to operate and support the new fleets. So right now, we simply don't have all those people. So what is the plan to make this happen in short order?
So we are constantly evaluating this and monitoring this issue. So in addition to planning growth and working on streamlining a lot of the recruiting things, because Chief Military Personnel and the command there obviously own the recruiting process, we have been working with them a lot. And the RCAF set up an attractions team to help in terms of obviously, communicating with Canadians and working with whether those are community colleges or other kinds of organizations to help increase awareness about opportunities in the RCAF specifically. But they're also helping applicants and, working along that side. So there's a bit of the, recruiting front end growth, and there are improvements being made. And in fact, we surpassed our strategic intake plan again. So we are on a path to growth. It's important to note, because during COVID, we were starting to decline, and we are still 2,000 short when it comes to people to fill positions. And what's interesting is, as we grow and work on, whether it's new capabilities and fleets, we are adding new positions. And so now we're starting to bring in more people, which is good, but we're still going to have to keep going after that, and so that we can close that gap. So how we're doing it in other areas, of course, retention is very important as well, because I want our members to know that they're valued and that we invest in their training and in the support and the environment and the culture that they work in. And I think that we have amazing opportunities and we have amazing people. And so I very much want to ensure that we are setting the right conditions for people to stay in as long as possible, noting that things can be done differently. So whether that's processes in terms of how we administer, we are really getting after digital transformation. And that's as a CAF, but even the RCAF is leaning forward with the RCAF Digital Hub and a lot of what they're doing to adopt cloud technologies and really try to work on data management, because we are not very good at that as a giant organization. But overall, the Canadian Armed Forces is actually working diligently on this too. It's so big and complex, and there are so many different systems that all kind of have to be cleaned up and brought on board. So there's processes and how we administer. So I think there are more efficient ways which will kind of help us not only hopefully retain people, but maybe streamline, where we focus our personnel. And then there's the training that you mentioned. And training is an area that we are going to have to focus on very deliberately, especially over the near term, because I don't think that the way we trained in the past 10 years is the way we're going to be successful to train the people we need in the future. So it does mean that 2 Canadian Air Division is working very hard on this, and they've got some really good and innovative ideas. And we're going to have to get a bit more comfortable with kind of trying things, seeing if it works, and being more comfortable that, okay, if this didn't work, then let's shift and adjust. But that's not that's easier said than done, I think, especially in a military environment. But I do believe we need to really challenge the status quo, and we have to see is this the best way to train, and whether that's aircrew technicians. We have a really good positive example at the School of Aerospace Control Operations at CIFSACO, and they have shifted their training model to what they call a cohort of 1, which means that they're basically able to onboard students progressively, and everyone kind of goes at their own pace. Because of the way they've designed the syllabus, there are a number of advantages. Not only are they some of them are going more quickly, so it's more efficient use of time. Those that are more advanced in the course are therefore also available to help mentor or coach some of the newer ones. So there's a better exchange, and you can actually solidify some of the learning when you're helping someone else understand things. So there are a number of really positive examples of success, of why that's working. And it's just one example, I believe, of someone thinking differently and saying, hey, maybe the old way we do this with, everyone coming and doing a course all at the same time, all graduating together, that might make sense in some areas, and it may, be something that we can adjust in others. The last area that I'll mention is we may not be able to do all of the training and things ourselves, meaning we're very used to military training, in a lot of situations. And I think that right now, we need to be a lot more open to kind of getting through the next few years, at least, with, are there other options? And again, there's not going to be one size fits all. And I think that it, is going to be challenging to understand exactly where that's possible and where it's not. But again, if we are going to deliver on the ambition that we have and that we need because of the threat environment that exists already, I think it's important that we think differently.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot there to think about. And it sounds like to me, you're talking about a lot of thinking outside the box, taking chances on different systems. It seems like in a culture where we are habitually quite risk averse, especially because our operations center so much around flying, we might need to get a little bit more comfortable with risk in certain ways.
You're absolutely right. And there are different kinds of risk. So I think that even if we changed, some of the way we do our flying training, we're not going to incur safety risk. We can think differently and we can do things differently. And so maybe there's administrative risk or other kinds, but we have to be very, clear-eyed about that. And we're going to make sure we do everything safely and professionally, and the people are our most valuable, capability when it comes down to it. And so, understanding what kinds of risks and where it is probably okay to test things out more, challenge things. This is an area that we are very actively working on, and frankly, I can say that from the perspective of where I am in the conversations I'm having, and what a lot of the staff, whether it's in Ottawa or Winnipeg or elsewhere, are working on, we're really having important conversations about better understanding, some of the risks that are kind of built into many of our processes, and that's where we're seeing, authorities for spending. Different funds and delegations of authorities that have maybe been a little too high. Well, we're seeing where we're moving them down, and where it's not in my power, we're having the discussions with whether it's the deputy minister or the chief financial officer or others. And so that is actually happening, and we're starting to see a lot of movement in some of these really bureaucratic areas that have not moved for a long time. So I think there's still a lot of work to do, but I'm really encouraged by where we're going.
And I think that delegation of authority moving further down the chain of command is really more in line with the history of what made the Canadian military so successful. We were known as people who enabled their junior members to take initiative and help find routes to success.
You're absolutely right. And when we think of all of the things that were accomplished, especially during wartime, there is a lot more that we can do if we can really encourage the right sort of innovation, empower our lower levels, the tactical level, to be able to innovate, to try things and do things. It's about accountability, and I think that's where we need to make sure that we have the right systems in place, but empower. I think that's it's going to be key to us moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So let's shift gears here and talk about modernizing the RCAF, which is a huge focus right now. What are the key adversaries and threats driving the need to transform the RCAF?
So clearly, I think the current environment and the volatility and just unpredictable nature of so many things that are happening right now really show us that the global security landscape is being, reshaped by a lot of forces and at a pretty fast pace. So we're seeing, with this renewed strategic competition between states and then, even complexities with non-state actors coming in, with rapid technological disruption, specifically, advanced air and missile threats, cruise missiles, hypersonic missiles, destabilizing behavior in the space domain, and accelerating impacts of climate change. Like everything is really happening all at the same time, and it is just really creating a very unpredictable and volatile environment. So we need to make sure that all of our decisions are informed by these threats. And so this is what has led to the RCAF strategy that was published in 2023. So this isn't even new based on what's happening today. It's because a lot of things were sort of on a path even before today. So it's very important to me for our members to understand why things are happening. And therefore, I think having that right discussion about understanding the threat environment and then what does that mean from a bigger picture is kind of key, because it really explains the why.
Who would you say are our greatest adversaries right now that are driving these threats?
So from a military perspective, it is still China and Russia. China has increased their military capabilities and grown and advanced them very, very rapidly over recent years. And they do have very advanced technologies. Russia does as well. And of course, they're using many of them in Ukraine. But both countries will sell a lot of their capabilities to others. And so it's bigger than just those two countries specifically. What's interesting with all of this is the competition aspect of it, because we look at the spectrum of operations, in these phases where we're in a competition phase now. And in that phase, everyone tries to kind of disrupt one another while they build their own capacity and build their own strength so that they are ready if they need it, basically. And it depends on the motives, because threats are certainly their capabilities, but intent is a clear part of that. And we assess adversaries' intent and try to prepare for possibilities. This is where it's important for us to be building our capabilities as well, because we absolutely need to have capabilities that can defeat anything our adversary could come at us with if we are to deter them. So it's kind of an ironic paradox again, where in order to prevent the worst case scenario, we actually need to be able to defeat and defend against the worst scenario. So to do that, you have to have the lethality and the high-end technology and the right operational and sustainment support to be able to prevail and maintain operational advantage against these adversaries. It's kind of an interesting discussion, because that's not something that Canada's really talked about much as a nation. We've always had a strong sense of security because we've had oceans, and our geography has protected us, and of course our relationship with the United States. We are still very strong allies with the United States at a military level. At the political level, there are a lot of things happening. However, we are remaining focused certainly on the military to military relationship. What we're doing with NORAD is actually stronger than ever. A lot of opportunities to continue to improve and work like through exercises, but day-to-day operations, because NORAD is ongoing constantly. So really, in my view, the sooner we can achieve sort of the right capabilities and the right training and mindset and culture and get the RCAF to a point where we can effectively deter, that is going to be very important, because if deterrence fails, that's when we will go into conflict and ultimately into crisis. And so it's an interesting sort of, this is strategic studies kind of 101 in terms of why do we need modern militaries? And so I just, I kind of share that because I don't know where I'm finding with a lot of the new focus on defense investment, and which is wonderful news. However, not everyone necessarily understands, well, why do we need all these things? And I think it's important for us to have these conversations so that we can help Canadians and specifically, our members understand why we're doing it.
Yeah, you essentially need a credible and lethal force to have credible deterrence, which hopefully stops the worst from occurring.
Absolutely. And there is a very important deterrence effect as well from interoperability with our allies and partnering with others, because those are things that our adversaries do not have to the same degree. Though we are seeing them align more, they are working together in various ways more. And I mentioned, they certainly do trade and sell things to one another. And there is some level of collaboration, but from our perspective, the level of interoperability that we have and are continuing to strive for with our partners and allies is also a really strong deterrent.
Mm-hmm. So a big discussion in this talk of modernization is building a fifth generation Air Force. Can you explain what that actually means in practical terms?
Yes, happy to. So essentially, the new baseline, I'm going to say, for air and space forces, frankly, because it does include a lot of the space-based assets that we're working on, and that a lot of our allies are working on. It's really about a large interconnected ecosystem, and it comes down to the technology advancements that we've seen over the past decades. So it's very data-driven, networked, as I mentioned. This ecosystem that is necessary to detect. So we have the sensors, like sensing the threats, whatever they may be, being able to feed and digest that information, that data, to decide on some kind of action, and then having the effectors to take whatever action is necessary against the threat. So when we think of this, this is why, certainly for the RCAF and for the Canadian Armed Forces, we are currently modernizing, and NORAD modernization is a big part of this. We're looking at over-the-horizon radar. We're looking at space-based surveillance with our Defense Enhanced Surveillance from Space project. Certainly communications, satellite communications are important in that as well. But this is the main reason that we are recapitalizing many of our fleets, is to ensure that we have those right things. So whether the sensors are ground-based, air-based, space-based, and then we're modernizing our Combined Air Operations Center. So we have a future CAOC project that we're working on. We're working with cloud-based command and control to make sure we have that secure data management and ability to share information, and then having the right effectors with, the right lethality. And that speaks to the advanced weapons and the fifth generation aircraft, which, includes the F-35 that, yes, it's under review by the government. There is a review ongoing. However, the government has not changed the current path yet. And so we are, moving forward with the first aircraft that we're going to be getting later this year, and sending pilots to Luke Air Force Base to start training. So the P8s are another part of this ecosystem with the advanced, data fusion, if you will. And we're getting the RPAS and the remote piloted aircraft system. So all of these are going to be operating together in this fifth generation ecosystem. And I think it's important to kind of understand that, because they're all also contributing in that way to integrated air and missile defense. So we're talking a lot about IAMD because it's been approved and is something that the government is keen to advance. However, it's kind of, it's interesting because IAMD is not one thing. Integrated air and missile defense is a lot of things. It is a giant system of systems. And the good news is we're already getting after many of them. There are more things that we are looking at and will need to continue to look at, like ground-based air defense. When we're talking about protecting Canada, protecting Canadian sovereignty, especially in the Arctic, what does it mean to be able to sense those threats and then take action if necessary against them? So these are all of the things that are part of our massive modernization and transformation, and it is really exciting. But it's certainly new space, and that's why we have to think differently, because this is modern technology. There's going to be AI driven systems, and it's very important that we really upskill our people to work in this environment.
Yeah, and you've mentioned a couple times the term system of systems, and that seems to be a really core concept when it comes to this fifth generation Air Force.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting because systems of systems is certainly just sounds like maybe like a cliche, but when you think of the complexity of the environment that we're talking about, where we're really trying to make sure that we can, protect Canadian territory ultimately first, but we're talking like from the seabed, underwater, at the surface, and all the way through space. So it is really a very interesting dynamic. And when you see what technology can really achieve, it absolutely changes the game. And I think it's exciting to be bringing our Air Force and Space Forces into this new world.
Yeah. And you also mentioned the need to think differently. And, for years, the RCAF was involved in counterinsurgency and asymmetric warfare. It definitely seems like the new reality is near peer conflict. How is the RCAF preparing for that world?
So it is definitely near peer conflict, and we are preparing by modernizing and ensuring that we have a future force that is equipped and better postured for this modern environment. It is important to do so with all of our joint partners because none of us is going to do anything alone. And we're working together, certainly, with the Army and Navy, but we now have a Joint Forces Command that has been stood up just not many months ago, which is a very important step to making sure that we are able to, generate the right capabilities for the future and not just continue to generate the old ones. Our future forces, whether that's the RCAF that we need or other parts of the Canadian Armed Forces, it's not just going to look like new platforms and new equipment. It's really going to be more networked, more modern, as I mentioned, AI driven and different things, because the need to meet the current environment that is, already really upon us in many ways is not going to, I don't think we're going to meet it with sort of the old way of doing things. So it's very, very important that we adapt as quickly as we can, noting that we have to lead our people through this change. And that's very important to me because it's great to bring on new equipment, to modernize, to talk about all of this, this vision and operational advantage in the future. And what does that mean? It's really important to me that we are able to bring our members along because change in transformation is like a collective human journey. And I don't think we should underestimate that because things are going to get, I believe, more complicated, not less. And that's something that if we can prepare for it properly, we will have the resilient and healthy warfighting force that we need.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial piece of the evolution because I think as humans, we tend to be often change resistant and change can be quite stressful. So when we're massively changing how we do business, I think you're absolutely right that managing the people side of that is going to be very important.
I agree. And from my perspective and the view that I bring to this is it is really important that we understand emotions. And, traditionally, this is not something that we've talked about. And everyone, hears about emotional intelligence. And to me, it's not a buzzword. Emotional intelligence and understanding oneself and also the others that are around us is critical to being able to move through difficult situations. Anything from, change in the workplace to actual conflict and combat and battle, because ultimately we are preparing our members to potentially fight wars. And that is something that we have to absolutely understand is an emotional journey, an emotional event. And the more we can understand ourselves and understand the emotions, we can understand what they're telling us. And like from my own experience, it's by acknowledging them, to understand them, to move past them. But it's okay to feel them. And I think that's an interesting shift that I've seen over recent years because I remember when it was not okay to talk about emotions and when, you certainly didn't want to show any. But as you've just said, we're all humans. And I don't understand how we think we're going to succeed if we pretend that we're not. So in my view, I think that we're going to get through this all together by supporting one another and understanding things. And it's going to make us better.
Yeah, certainly a focus on the emotional side of things and the mental health side of things is going to be very important to give it its due portion of the pie, I think.
Yeah.
We are recording this on April 2nd, 2026. It'll come out in late April, but yesterday, as of the date of recording, Colonel Jeremy Hansen launched on his historic mission to orbit the moon and test the systems on board the Orion spacecraft. You were able to attend the launch. In fact, you came straight from your flight back to do this interview, which I appreciate so much. What was it like to watch Jeremy make history, and how do you see the space domain fitting into the future of the RCAF?
So I am just sitting here with a giant smile on my face because it was a wonderful experience to witness Colonel Jeremy Hansen's launch into space with the Artemis II crew. It is really hard to describe the excitement and emotions that we were all feeling. And I just feel so privileged to have been present to see it and was able to talk to him and the Artemis II crew on the day prior. They were in quarantine, so they were behind the glass, but they were able to screen a few of us to be able to go and talk to them. And so inspiring to meet that crew and Jeremy, who is just epitomizes all of the professionalism and wonderful things that we all strive to be in the RCAF. And as a CAF astronaut and a Canadian Space Agency astronaut, we're just like, I am beyond proud to just have been able to witness this and to see what he is doing now. One of the things that really struck me in speaking with the crew, they were so calm, and we know they're professional and smart and know what they're doing, but they were just very zen with everything. Like they knew that they were ready for this mission. They knew that the mission might not go if something happens, and because it had already been delayed twice. But they were excited to go, but not in a the rest of us are all just like full of excitement and can hardly contain it. But they were just very calm, and I just thought, I cannot even imagine what is going through their minds as they prepare to leave the Earth's atmosphere, and go into deep space. So there's a real mind-boggling element to this. So all that to say, it was a tremendously positive experience. Got to go and spend the time, obviously, with the Canadian Space Agency, and they've worked very, very hard, certainly with Colonel Hansen, but also Colonel Josh Kutrick, who is planning and preparing for an International Space Station mission, and the other Canadian astronaut, Dr. Jenny Gibbons, who was the backup for Jeremy on this particular flight. So it was a real treat to be able to see them, meet them. I met Jeremy's family, and they are just tremendous. And to see the support that all Canadians are feeling in this really historic time is just amazing. So the second part of your question about the space domain, I can't stress how important this is. I think certainly from a military perspective, we do rely on the space domain for our operations. So, whether it's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, or, position, navigation, and timing, communications, and domain awareness, I mean, it's really critical. I think a lot of Canadians would be surprised if they realize just how much everyone relies on space. Everything that is, GPS, or the position, navigation, time, PNT as it's called as well, banking systems, so much of everything we do day to day relies on space. So from a military perspective, or from a, what do we need our space forces to do perspective? Well, it's really important that we think of how are we protecting those assets? How are we ensuring that everyone can have assured access to space so that we can maintain the right domain awareness? Clearly, a lot of potential with the defense industrial strategy and the fact that there's investment and a real desire to develop sovereign Canadian space capabilities. That very much includes military ones and civilian ones. So this is an area where, the idea of dual use is extremely important. And I think that what we'll find is if we continue to work together in the way we are, so we certainly collaborate within defense, but also with, the Canadian Space Agency and other parts of our government that also rely on space. Environment Canada relies on things like for the weather, and all the applications are literally endless. I think it's just really important that we continue to grow our Space Force. We are working very closely with allies, and we're part of the Combined Space Operations Initiative. And so we work with, it's a group of 10 nations that basically have committed to sharing information. We meet throughout the year and work on various sort of projects and things together. So being able to share information between countries, being able to ensure that we understand and, can deal with potentially irresponsible behavior in space, because this is another area where we have adversaries with different ambitions, and we need to be careful because our assets can be held at risk. And so it's really about figuring out how to best defend and protect those, and then what kinds of actions can we take even in terms of space control as we evolve that discussion in the future.
Yeah, we're really in a bit of a second space race right now. Like China has announced they want to be on the moon by 2030. The United States has accelerated their plans to be there by, they said 2028 when I was watching the launch yesterday with my two boys, which was an amazing experience. So yeah, there's definitely some competition going on there.
There really is. And I think that's where, as I mentioned before, when you're in the competition phase, you need to make sure that you are building your capacities to be able to potentially defend, defeat, to deter those of your adversaries. And it does come with some uncertainty. We do not know for certain, what China or Russia will do next. But I think it's extremely important that we make sure we're ready for a lot of things because there is a lot of unpredictability right now in the world.
Yeah. And just before we move on from that topic, I just wanted to echo your sense of pride in Jeremy. His message that he posted online to Canadians was really inspiring. And he just seems like an incredible guy.
He really is. And yeah, could not be more proud.
So as the first woman to lead the RCAF, what does that responsibility mean to you? And what progress would you like to see during your tenure, both culturally and operationally?
That's a great question. So it's really interesting because on one hand, it's no big deal that I'm a woman and I'm the commander of the RCAF because I'm doing the work, I'm doing my job with everyone else. I am qualified and, relying on my experts to help me where I need it and, doing the best I can. But on the other hand, it is important because this is not something that's been done before. And I have realized that representation does matter. And when I talk to other women or even other minority groups who see this example, they're happy to see that it's possible. Because before that, they didn't see that it was possible. And I think we sometimes underestimate that. So I'm very, very proud. And I do take that responsibility seriously because I want women, specifically, and all minority groups who are potentially underrepresented to feel comfortable to understand that our organization is an inclusive one and needs to continue to strive so that everyone feels included, certainly the way that I do now. So I think from that cultural perspective, we're absolutely on the right path. There will always be work to do on that, and I think that it's going well. The things that I've learned, and I'll kind of share one with you. When I think of the idea of it just matters who can do the job, or just it's only about who can do the job. It doesn't matter what you look like, or if you're a minority or not. And that is true to a certain point. But if it was just about who can do the job, then I would have to ask, well, why don't we have more female leaders then? Why was I the first one after 100 years? So, I came in after the centennial. And I think it's a good question. So I started kind of thinking about that a lot more in recent years. Certainly did not think about any of this earlier in my career because I was very busy and, I was adapting in the environment that I was in and frankly enjoying a wonderful career. But the answer that I have found comes with it's the systems that are designed by the dominant group in an organization. And the dominant group, whatever that might be, doesn't necessarily have to learn the perspectives of others or perspective taking in general because the system was designed for them. And when you kind of think of it that way and take that step back, it's not good or bad, or in fact, I didn't even use male and female there because you can apply this to any kind of organization or group. It actually starts to make sense. As a minority coming into that larger organization, and we talked about it earlier, a male-dominated environment, I already brought a different perspective. So when I saw the sort of the norms or the cultures, the way things were in the military, I had a choice. Like I was going to kind of follow along and be part of that, or I could say something and speak up. And so I think that now that we're kind of understanding that there are some systems that are not as conducive to allowing or empowering women to, maybe get to senior ranks, we're tackling those barriers. And I think that it's by continuing that conversation and really just understanding how things impact people. And sometimes unintentionally. In fact, most often unintentionally. So it's not because systems aren't designed to cause problems or become barriers. They were designed for a different reason. So it's about looking at what those reasons are and assessing them in today's context. So family life is a really big part of that. My husband was a pilot in the RCAF as well, and he left the Reg Force so that I could continue several years ago. And he was the presence at home, taking care of our children, and he got to pursue a few other things, and now he's certainly working, but part-time and on his own schedule. But, we had a few challenges as a service couple back then that I'm now seeing the organization deal with in a different and more positive way. So I've seen change, and I think that it's very positive.
Oh, that's so good to hear. To wrap this up, as we mark the 100th episode of this podcast, for those serving today, what do you want them to understand about where the RCAF is headed?
That's a great question. The RCAF is definitely transforming. It's not going to look exactly the same, and there will be new types of capabilities and new technologies. However, there are a lot of things that aren't changing, and our fighting spirit, our people, our traditional culture, and the ethos that we are all proud to serve, and certainly can see even through, Colonel Jeremy Hansen literally living our motto, Sicatur ad Astra, such as the pathway to the stars. I really feel that it is a wonderful organization, and we have so much to contribute to Canada, and we have amazing people. So that's what motivates me when I get up in the morning. It is the absolute privilege of being able to lead amazing people, even though we're in a very challenging time and we have some pretty daunting tasks ahead of us. I think that we're going to get through it together.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, Jamie, that is going to do it for our chat today for our 100th episode. I want to thank you and your staff so much for making this happen. Scheduling this gave me a little peek into what a busy world you live in. And honestly, we're just so grateful that you took the time to speak with us today. So thank you again for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. And it is a privilege to be on your 100th episode. So I'm really excited about that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that wraps up our 100th episode with our special guest, Lieutenant General Jamie Speiser-Blanchet. We're so thankful she took the time to be on the show today, and we hope you really enjoyed that. Tune in next week as we sit down once again with my very good friend, Captain Nils Olsen. We ended up going to 2 episodes on his Sea King series, so we will be talking about his time instructing here at 3CFFTS, as well as their participation in the 2025 Manitoba wildfire evacuation in Pukatawagan. Do you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard in this show? Would you or someone you know make a great guest, or do you have a great idea for a show? You can reach out to us at thepilotprojectpodcast@gmail.com or on all social media at @podpilotproject. And be sure to check out that social media for lots of great videos of our RCAF and mission aviation aircraft. As always, we'd like to thank you for tuning in and ask for your help with the big 3. That's like and follow us on social media, share with your friends, and follow and rate us 5 stars wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Keep the blue side up. See ya!
Engineer, shut down all 4.
Shutting down all 4 engines.